All right, welcome back. We are OOP3200, and that is Object-Oriented Programming 2 in the fall 2020 semester at Durham College, and it's week 14, last week. Part 1 of our broadcast, I'm talking about JavaFX continued a little bit, but before we get there, let's talk about our plan for this week. So last week of class, in-class exercise 13 is due Friday, Java Quiz 2 is due Sunday, Java Lab 5, the last Java Lab, is due Sunday as well. I know that these are outside, just slightly outside, a couple days outside of the last day of semester, but it's going to be okay. If you guys get it done by then, I should have everything marked and everything ready by Monday, so you should be good to go. So that is these things. Again, we're sitting here, but what's due is what I'm really thinking about, which is the in-class exercise is 2%, your Java assignment 5, 6%, and your Java Quiz 2, which should say Java Quiz 2, which is 5%, for a total of 13% this week. So this week's weighted a little bit higher than other weeks. Okay, so that's what we're doing. Again, we're doing more JavaFX is what we're doing. And last week, what we talked about was a few things. We talked about the JavaFX scene graph and node structure. The application class, a stage class, scene class, layout containers. We talked about were Hbox, Vbox, and GridPadding, as well as basic controls, label, and button. And this is kind of a basic structure we talked about. This week, we're going to get into aligning objects in the Hbox, or I was going to say Xbox, Hbox or Vbox. Xbox is on my mind because Xbox Series X is never going to be available. Yes, and spacing objects and padding them. GridPadding, we're also going to talk really briefly about that, just to revisit some of these things, because we talked like this was super fast last week. Displaying images, how to do that, and button controls. If I'm giving you this stuff, chances are your lab 5, last lab, is going to have a bunch of these little things to get you guys to go do basic input and output and using a class. That's really what the lab is all about. Okay, so that's what we're doing. To get started, let's start with our IntelliJ idea. Last week, when we were touching stuff, we were, oh yeah, this is the lab I was working with. Let me just close this one down. Hopefully you guys found the lab okay. I didn't get any questions, which was was interesting. Because normally I get a bunch of questions for lab 4. I was expecting you guys to do more, so which is totally fine. If you didn't do it, it's okay. So last week we started off with this one, which was, and there was a bit of stickiness in terms of getting all the nodes and everything working. So just to remind you, when we start today's, we're going to do kind of a similar setup to this. In fact, why don't we do this? Why don't we start off today with something as opposed to nothing. So I'm going to copy this one, and we're going to start with a copy of this one to get going with. All right, so let's do that. So remember how we do the copy stuff, right? When we want to start something new, we kind of hit, let's suppose, our where we have everything. So here's nothing. What? That is weird. That is really weird there. Where did I put my stuff? I love when this happens. Love when this happens. All right, hold on a second here. Where do we put this thing? I love it. Oh yeah, by the way, notice how it takes a bit of time to kick this one off and going. It's because it has to recompile, like you saw, everything else that happens. Let me just bring it up in the... So I want to look at this one. Open in File Explorer is what I want. Where did I put this thing? Source. In the desktop. Oh, that was interesting. It was right there, but I looked in the wrong place. Okay, so I don't know how okay, so imagine if, I'm just going to close this down again. Imagine if I have 13 and I want to do 14. I'm going to copy it. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So copy, paste. Right, so it made a copy. Let's rename it to 14. There's some trickiness here. Just letting you know. All right. And now I want to open up this one, but notice it says less than 13 inside, right? Well, that can't be. We have to redo this and realign it. I'm also got this Git folder that I want to set up as an example. So maybe if I download something and I give you it, what do you do? How do I realign or get rid of this thing? Well, first of all, let's do the Git part first. I can use a command prompt for this. I'm going to put this up on GitHub in a second. So just bear with me while I do this, guys, and I'll show you what I'm doing. I'm going to bring up a command prompt here. So here's my command window. Here we are. It's big. It's too big. Okay, and I want to do cd space. I'm going to do everything by command line today. And again, to do this, what I'm going to do, you have to have Git installed locally, like we talked about earlier. So here I'm in Git in my lesson 14. I'm preparing before I start IntelliJ. Okay, and what I want to do here is I want to say git remote remove origin, because basically what's happening is there's a remote that we've set up to connect to my Git, the GitHub repo online. So I want to get rid of this, the origin remote, because it's not going to go to the same repository. So if I bring up here, let's bring up GitHub. Here's GitHub. And you can see we have ICE12. I want to make ICE13 in there. So let's make a space for that. So again, we're going to do it manually this time around. And I'm showing you this little thing so that way you know how to manipulate things. You probably know how, some of you probably know how to do this already, but it's okay. We'll say ICE13, right? So there we go. And once I've done that, I'm going to have a couple of steering instructions that GitHub gives you. All right, so I can take these last 3 lines of code, copy them, go back to my command prompt and right-click and paste them, right? And once I do that, then I can push everything up to GitHub. Okay, so now it's connected. So my ICE14 or ICE13 is connected to this one, and I've just based it off of the previous one. Notice it says ICE12. Let's redo that. So I can do this up online. I can go up on GitHub, change this to ICE13 for week 14. So minor changes, commit the changes online, right? But now we're behind one commit online. Where, like for example, your Git repository online is 1 commit ahead. There's 3 commits, but we only have 2 commits locally. How do we do that? How do we fix that? Again, I'm going to just pull. So I'm going to go here and just go git pull. And git pull will update or put me in at the same position as an example as what's happening online. Okay, now if you don't, as an example, have access to your Git locally, that's okay, because I'm going to put this up in a second and you'll be fine. So now I'm just going to copy this. It's a good starting point for us, but don't do it yet because there's still some stuff to do. I'm going to put this inside of where it says ICE13, just like normal. So I'm going to go into create a link, and this is the GitHub link for week 14. Okay, so that's where the link is going to be for you in a second, so you can download it. Now you're going to have to do some modifications too if you're going to download this and use it just like normal, right? But this is where it's going to be. So if you wanted to follow along, or if you got behind, you can go there. But we're not ready yet. We're not ready yet because I've just put this up on GitHub. But if you notice, if I go into 14, you see that it still says 13. So how do we fix that? Well, we're going to open up IntelliJ, and I'm going to close this project down. So this is last week's project because it says lesson 13. Again, there's some finicky details here, but not too much. So I'm going to close this project down, and it's going to bring me the menu. Here's the menu, and what I want to do is I want to open up 14. So I want to go to open or import. All right. I can also get from version control, but we're going to do it locally as if I've copied, which we have, right? So again, I'm going to look at my desktop. This is my finickiness that I was talking about before, because I got to go into the right users. I think it's OneDrive /desktop. isn't it? Users, it's not users, my username, users, me, OneDrive, desktop. Now some of you may not be using OneDrive, and that's totally fine. I'm actually okay with that. But this is it. Here's the, I've just navigated to my lesson 14 today, and then press OK. And it opens up, but it doesn't say lesson 14. It says OOP3200 F2020 lesson 13 instead of lesson 14. How do I change that? Well, I can, sorry. I want to refactor and I want to rename, right, the lesson. Now it says build module 13, yeah, but I want to rename it, right? So it's going to be module 14, right? And then now you notice I have to do that first. So first thing I do is I have to rename this part first. If you don't do that, then the IML file, which we saw earlier, which is this one, see now it says 14 before it said 13. You cannot try and rename this manually. It'll mess up your project structure. So don't do that. All right, so that's the first part. And now it says it's proper. And the first thing we want to do is check to see if all the other structures are okay. It says we are okay, but let's run it to make sure it's good. So I'm just going to run it now, and if everything goes well, then we should be okay. We should see a little window that says click me. Click me, man. Click me. All right, so that if you've done everything up to there, this is good. Now let's put this one up on GitHub, and then you download it. Okay, so you can start. This is a good starter, if you will. So I'm going to go to my commit. I'm going to just connect all these things. I'm going to say commit. Maybe a commit message like updated project files will be good. Commit. So it does that little commit message, yes. And once that's done, then I'm going to go to push it up on GitHub. Updated project files, I'm going to push. And that should push everything up to GitHub. If everything goes well, you have a little message here that says it's pushed. To confirm that, we can go into GitHub and refresh, and we should see 4 commits where you can see the last thing we did was updated project files. Pretty simple. All right, again, some finicky stuff, but not much. So you should start with this one. So start with this starter, ICE 13 today. Why? It'll save us a pile of time, right? As opposed to going into your file, going into project structure, adding in the project itself with the library. We've already downloaded, the assumption is you've already downloaded and installed JavaFX. If this structure or this location of your JavaFX SDK is different, you need to modify it up here. It won't work for you unless you have the exact same link as me, if you will, or the path. If your path is different, you need to go in here and modify your path. Okay, so you need to do that anyway. That's number one. So once you've done that, that's okay. But then remember we talked about we want to go and do our run edit configurations here, and under edit configurations you need to specify the module path as well. All right, so again, if this is different for you, if you're running on a Mac, then you're going to have to come in here and modify this so that way it matches the path to your JavaFX SDK. If you don't do it, then you will not be able to run the application. Okay, so I'm going to do my check now. Are you with me? Check mark if you're with me, X if you're not. That's the first part. I got some hands, some thumbs up, some check marks, and I got an X. Nicholas, what's going on, Nicholas? And Muzda. Okay. VCS is having issues. Okay. Again, all you have to do is invalid route mapping. That's weird. What I recommend is pull it down from GitHub. And if I was going to do that, let me just show you how to do that again. Again, this is just to help you guys, because you're going to have to do something like this for your last lab. So if I close my project down, remember that when I launch IntelliJ, I have other options, right? I have the other option I have is get from version control. All right, so what this does is it allows you to put your version control link here, and then you can download the project from version control. You can specify what version control. Typically we use Git, Subversion, Mercurial, almost never anymore. And then specify your directory. So if I wanted to pull the same folder down as an example, but let's move it somewhere else so that it doesn't go in the same spot, right? So again, maybe I want to go into that Durham College one that's empty, and then specify my URL. So how do I get this? Well, Jackie and I did an example of that last time, but let's do another one. So I'm going to go into up here. Let's say I want to grab this URL, so I'm going to grab this one right here, right? And going back here and put, kind of copying and pasting the URL link here, right? So there's my URL. Again, this is repository URL. You can also use GitHub directly. So if it was someone else's repository like Jackie's, I could do that. Or if I go to GitHub, right, then the other thing that this will do is it'll try and access my GitHub repo, right? And anything that I'm connected to, it will give me a long list of stuff. I could search for it, so I could say something like OOP3200, and if I have access to it, right, then I can pull it down. It'll try and search for it. It's doing its work though, so you have to give it a second for you to do that. It'll try and source from my repository. I have a lot of repositories, so it could take some time. And that's why they give you this other link, this repository URL, because it's a copy paste. So there you go. So you see that I've got all these things up here. And there's 13, so I can always just click on that, right? That's the other way I can do it. And I can click clone. And when I do that, it's going to pull it down the same way. Let's try this one and see the difficulties you might have. So clone. All right, so now we're good, but are we good, right? So let's look at the project files. So we've got our project files happening, but we don't have any of the configuration. Notice it says add configuration. That's totally missing. And there's some things we have to do from before, but it's cloned. I mean, if I want to look at my files, no problem. Here's my source files, my controller, and my main. But I'm going to have a bunch of, chances are, if I haven't set it up properly, red marks, right? Look at my imports. So these are all good. And the way to check this is to go to File, Project Structure, and then what I want is under Libraries, this has to be there, all right? It's also still connected to your GitHub link. Yep, yeah, because I'm pulling down from my GitHub link, but if you just copy, I'm cloning this one. That's different if I did clone, right? If I did the other way, I'm not cloning. I'm actually, I'm just copying the files. Now let's take a look at that configuration. So if I go run, edit configurations, right? So that's what I want to do. Then notice that there really isn't a configuration here at all, right? And notice it says a couple of options, jar application or JavaScript debug. So, right, those are the options that I have. What other thing can I do? Well, I can build an application. That's what I want, an application. And I can specify the main Java class, whatever that is. Here it is, right? So that's the main, sample main. Now my VM options I got to put in there. And like I said, I don't know what those are. I can't remember what the module is, but we can always look that up from last week. Because remember, all I wanted to do is put that in. So I'd have to put this in. And once I have that in there, it'll work. If I don't put the VM options in there, then it won't trigger. Okay. And to show you this, if I just press run, if I was going to do such a thing, first of all, notice that it's not a runnable yet. And I could click on this little green button here, which creates my main. And once I've done it once, even if it fails, like it did, it created my application. It'll allow me to run this again. Okay. Now the reason why this failed is, again, we don't have our VM options, right? So how do I get that? So again, I would kind of go up and search what we did last time, which is, remember we went and said IntelliJ JavaFX is what I searched, right? So it tells you how to do it. in IntelliJ, and one thing it talked about here in this link when I was searching is in the VM path, which is something we want to change. Okay, so if you run closer, it tells you about all this stuff. One thing it says is the module path that you want to put in, which is this module path right here. Okay, so let's just grab this whole module path. It's obviously going to change up here, so I'm going to go back to my edit configuration, run edit configurations. I'm going to go into my VM options and put that link in there, but this is obviously wrong, right? Because I don't have a path that says path to JavaFX SDK. That's not correct. Remember, I have to find that in my operating system. So I'm going to go into my path. I know that it's inside of, see, I'm reviewing this because you're going to have some trouble coming up with this. You're going to go through this problem potentially, or by downloading my files or somebody else's as an example, and you'll have an issue. So that's why I'm showing it to you. Okay, so again, I'm going to go to Program Files, Java. That's where it is. And I'm going to go into that SDK, JavaFX SDK 1501, in the lib folder. This is where I want to go. Now I have this in my path. I could right-click here and go Edit Address, copy it, and go back to this. And then where it says this thing right here, paste it in. I recommend surrounding this whole block by quotation marks. I think I find that is more effective in safeguarding my, the actual path. And once I have that, if I press apply and OK and I run it, then it should, if everything goes well, be able to do it from there. Okay, so we're back to normal. So that is the process. Again, it's a bit of a, kind of detailed process, but notice that that's done. One thing also to notice is here, it says ICE 13, but it says lesson 14. That's a difference because lesson 14 is what I'm doing, but I'm downloading it from ICE 13. ICE 13 is actually the folder that it creates because I put this into the ICE 13 location up on, or my repository up on GitHub. That's what it was called. And when I have that, then that's when, there's a difference here between one and the other. Okay, are you with me again? You should have at least one way or the other your stuff is running at this point. Again, I'm reviewing this because I know there's a bit of a setup. I know it's a one-time cost, but every time we make a new application, right, as an example, then we get into this thing. I only see a few thumbs up. Hopefully you guys are still good with everything else. Okay, I'm going to drop out of this one and do the actual one. So I'm going to close my project. And I'm going to go back to IntelliJ and rerun lesson 14. ICE 14 is still there, but I'm not going to look at it. I want to look at lesson 14 because that's what I called it. It's going to decompile everything and we're good to go. I only want to cover a couple of controls with you today and then let you go. Like I said earlier, I'm going to, if we go back to the PowerPoint, what I'm going to be doing today is just fixing up your Lab 5 so that it's fair. I don't want to kill you guys with requirement. So it's just going to be very straightforward in terms of making a user interface with JavaFX. Okay, so that's what it's going to be based on. So I want to just cover a few things. So what we're covering today is more stuff with Hbox and Vbox, the more details about the GridPadding container, how to do images, how to make buttons and text fields. So there's a bunch of stuff here, but my expectation is we're just going to get it done, just the basic stuff. I'm not expecting you to do a lot here, and only because I want to make sure that we have enough time to take questions and that kind of thing. Okay, so very straightforward. All right, let's get through this, and yeah, like so. So I wanted to go and look at what we did last time. So when we ran it, like we said, let's run this one more time. You're going to see kind of a really ugly container, a box that's 640 by 480. That is our window, and the window, if you remember, was generated by the stage. So the stage itself, I want you to always think about it as a in your mind as a analogy of the window itself. Okay. Now notice that it also uses something called sample FXML. FXML we're not going to handle this semester. Hopefully, if you touch Java again, I'm not sure if you will. Will you touch Java again? I don't know if you will. But if you will, then you know, whoever's going to be your Java professor there, if you're going to do it, is going to go into detail more about how to use an fxml document for formatting and a bunch of other stuff. For us, we're not going to need to do this, so we're just going to get rid of it. Yeah, so I think you're going to have more, hopefully more of this, right, next semester. So that's the first thing. So we're going to get rid of that part. And as I'm going to go through this, let's talk about this. So hello world is the title, which is, you know, kind of, you know, the title of our window. We have a lot of things we can do with our primary stage, by the way. So if you look at primary stage dot, and you can see that I can set minimum width and height. We talked about this last time as a review. We can set the scene, which is what we do. I can also set the always on top property so that it always stays on top. I can always close something if I press a button, right? So what happens if I make a button that's a close button? And how do I set that up properly in a grid? Well, one of the things that I talk about here in our PowerPoint today, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. This is for your reference, is the idea of a grid. Excuse me. Grid pane. So you can see that the grid pane, like we talked about last week, and this is kind of what we're using, is creates kind of a structure for us to position things, right? So if I set up my layout and I want to put my button at the bottom, let's say right corner, an exit button at the bottom right corner inside of column 3, there's a couple of things we need to do to set this up. One, I need to set up my padding and my spacing. So spacing, I want you to think about it as margin, and padding, of course, is just padding. If you've done any kind of web, it's just the spacing between or inside the object itself. So again, we set up our grid pane like we did last time, and then we kind of add the control in there, whatever the control is going to be, right? And then where in our column and row, so column row format starting at 0. And then what we want to do is there's something called set hgap, horizontal gap in the grid pane, and set vgap if you want to as well. Hgap and vgap is explained earlier on, and that's how you do your spacing. And it's the same thing when it comes to padding. So if I said, for example, I want to set my padding, you can use something called a new insets method and the SetPadding method. So new insets object and a SetPadding method to kind of create padding of whatever we want. So let's do this with what we have already. So I want to do, going back up here, I want to set my vgap and my hgap to both 10. So again, if I go back to, let's see what we got when we do this. So we'll leave the button where it is right now. And remember that it's inside of a grid pane. By the way, there's an error. It says hello label is here. And I'm getting an error. It says primary stage hello label. It's underlining it, right? And that's and there's also a goodbye label and a click me button. So wait, what's the problem here? So yeah, that's because of this. Ha ha ha. Because I've been fooling around. That's why. So yeah. So what it is when you run it. Right now, you got this thing right here. We're gonna space this out a little bit. Let's go back there. Fix that up. So again, this so far is the layout that we had. We added all these things in. We put in column and then row format. That's what this does, right? With a new grid pane. We don't need this stuff right here because we're not using an Hbox or a Vbox right now. But what we want to do is we want to set up the vgap. So gridpane dot set hgap and vgap. So notice that again, if you set vgap and hgap, if I go set v, and it does this. So if I put vgap in there, why would that not be cool? Why would that not work at all? So if I want to say vgap of 10, how come I'm not getting that? So this is interesting, right? It's either my grid pane. Oh yeah, first of all, it should be grid pane. Ha ha ha. not grid pane, right? That's grid pane is the object. Grid pane itself is a class, right? So there we go. That's one of the reasons. And let's do the same thing. Grid pane dot set hgap. All right. So there we go. So hgap and vgap. Save that and run it. Wow, it's a comedy of errors today. All right, and then what do you get? You get a bit of separation between these two, the hello world and goodbye. And let's do the same thing with padding. So if I said grid pane set padding, and we want to do a new insets, right, of 10. Notice that inset says, you know, we have multiple choices. Alt enter. Where we're going to give. We don't want to use this one. We want to use JavaFX geometry, right? And now if I press save and run it, then we should see a bit of padding as well. So padding as well as spacing. Okay, so that's kind of it'll start looking a little bit better than what we had before. Okay, so that's hgap and that's vgap. Okay, and you can set the same hgap and vgap for horizontal. Obviously, if you want a Hbox, a horizontal box, then that would be totally cool, right? As well as if you had a vertical box or Vbox, right? You can do the same stuff as well. Okay. So I want to put this. If I set up a box, because the grid pane itself has a lot of other things. Let's take a look at this. If I say grid pane dot, and if I look at not just vgap and hgap, but there are quite a bunch of different methods, right? There's max size and min size, right? Notice that I'm getting a couple of overloads for this one, min size, or a couple of methods. So that would be like a double and a double, right? So V and V1. Obviously, this is column and row, right? As an example. So column and row. So what if I did that? What if I said I want my minimum size to be like, you know, a grid that is like a 5 by 5, right? Whenever I think about using a grid pane or any kind of table layout or cell layout, my first initial reaction is, what if I use something to help me out, to plan it like Excel? So if you have Microsoft Excel, or if you use, you know, kind of a spreadsheet from Google Docs or whatever equivalent, that's fine too. I'm just going to use Excel here to demonstrate this. So I'm going to change this to make it bigger for you. So I'm going to make it like 20. So imagine if these are the cells in my table, and I want to make it so that I'll put it over here so you can see it. It doesn't matter where, but I want to make my little application to make it look like this. Okay, so this is kind of the size I want. So let us put in, just when I'm designing, let us put in a few kind of rows in here. And what I want to put is I want to put my button down here. That's what I want. So this is where my button is going to be. And I want my button there, and I want my kind of a hello label, you know, there, you know. So let's say hello here, and I want my goodbye label here. Okay, so that's what I want. So that's what I want. So if I did this, and if I want to space it out just like this, my problem is that I have nothing in these spaces in here altogether, right? So how do I do that? Because right now, unless it'll fill the cells in there as an example with nothing, right? So we got to figure out a way of taking care of that. We're going to go to the documentation for this, of course, which is what you would do if I give you something to do, right? So here's the stuff that I want. This is what I want, but let's take a look at the columns and rows. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Kind of a weird thing, 5 by 8. Let's make it, I don't know, 6 by 8, just to make it so that it's a little bit more reasonable, and it's the same kind of structure, relatively, you know, for what we're seeing, right? By the way, you can make this whatever you want, but I'm making 6 columns by 8 rows. Let's try this out. So again, going back to here, if I did my planning, so I'm going to say set min size, right? And I want to say my min size is going to be, again, column row. So 6 rows by 8 columns. Okay, let's see what that does, if it actually does what I think it's going to do. So I'm running this now, and then, no difference, right? Because all we're doing is setting things up. Remember what this is set up. So this is here. Notice that hello label is set up in column 1, right, row 0, and column 1, row 1 is where this is. Well, what about column 0? Because we know this is a column 0, right? Like if I go back to change this up, and if I change this to 0, 0, right? And I rerun this thing, so save it and run it. Will it run? Yeah, because it starts off as 0-based counting, and there's no difference. There's a bit of more padding, but that's it. So I want to kind of pad in, or whatever you want to call it, the minimum cell size that I want to put in here. So how do I do that for my grid pane? So this is minimum size. Well, how about like cell size? So what do I do that? So I say grid pane dot, and again, notice that set is a bunch of stuff, and set ID and layout and max height and so on, but there's nothing that really, and there's some, by the way, there's a bunch of events. Notice that there's a bunch of events you can set up, which we're going to talk about event handling later on, but there's a ton of them that we can tap into later on, right? There's also something like some other things that we can do. Set opacity, we talked about this before. We can also do special effects like set rotate to some kind of angle. I can also set the rotation axis to a point in 3D, X and Y coordinates. We can also scale it if you want to, and so on. So this is the kind of stuff. So let's take a look at GridPane online and see if we can get some more information around it, because I think that's an important step. Again, I'm just going to pull up our window, and I'm going to say JavaFX GridPane, and let's see what we get when we look at our documentation. So it talks about some GridPane examples, set row index, and so on. And if I scroll down, it gives me the methods, but well, it doesn't do much in terms of unless I go through and do an exhaustive read about what it can do. But this is pretty good because at least you can always click and see what these methods do. Setting constraints and so on. Sets the column row indices for the child when connected in a grid pane and so on. But I want to make it so that I want to have some spacing in the grid. So how do I do cell spacing in grid pane? So again, I would call something like cell spacing JavaFX GridPane. Right? How do I do that? Right? And so we know padding between columns. We know how to do that. We just did that, right? So here's something else. It says we can use the VGAP and the padding, which we did. Notice it says margins around the whole grid. So 10, 10, 10. 10 is insets. Remember I just put 1? 1 means it's all the same, or I can put padding around the way I like it. So that's something that you can do. But again, how do you set something up so that there's something in there, right? So I want to use the grid pane that is exactly how I like it. What do you recommend? If it was you, what would you look up? You've done UI programming before. What is my problem? So again, it says padding, and I can do advanced layout. Advanced layout is obviously going to be with my my little file that we talked about earlier, right? So what other things can we do? Anyone have an idea? Again, I need a final interaction today. I know it's the last day, for us pretty much, but I want to make sure that you guys are good. If I was going to look things up, you're going to look things up on your own. What do you recommend? Again, we can kind of look at this, look at different sites, and see what you would do. This is how you would do. You would go through this and kind of look through this, right? So I can put text controls, which we're going to do as well, right? So different kind of controls. We can add the text control to the grid pane, right? We can do that. But it's almost like I want a spacer or something like that, right? So a lot of padding and insets, and all this kind of stuff, but really it doesn't do anything unless it's there's something that's in there, right? There's something that's in there. So what else do you recommend? Well, it really comes down to you know, what we're trying to do here, right? So far we only have you know, these objects in here, but remember, and here's something to think about as well, could I not include a layout within a layout? We have a container on the outside. Can we not put a container on the inside, like a Vbox or an Hbox? Let's try that out. So here we can decide, we can create any container we want, yeah? And let's make another container. Before we make the grid pane, as an example, let's make another container for Hbox or Vbox. So we're going to say Hbox, call it Hbox, right? And was equal to a new Hbox container, just like before. So we kind of set this up. And can we not do an hbox.add, right? Because we kind of did the same thing. Notice that we can get padding. We can also set the Hbox is we can set you know, hgap as an example. These kind of the same way, and we'll try and do this again. But remember that the Hbox container, what we want to do is make the object first, whatever the label is, hello label and whatever, and then put it inside the Hbox. So, and in order, right? So for example, I want to put inside here what I want. So I want to put inside there a number 10 and then some kind of label. So let's put in the hello label again. I wonder if we can do the hello label twice. Can we make another instance of the hello label in our Hbox? Okay, and what I want to do is take this Hbox, and put it inside of another grid area. So for example, my layout is 0, 0, and here my goodbye label is 0, 1. You know, in 0, 0 where we have our hello label, let's make that an Hbox instead. Can we do that? It doesn't complain, right? No problem. Thank you, take care. So again, we if you think about this in our Hbox, how does this work? So if I run it, I'm just making a new Hbox and I'm putting in the Hbox in there, right? It still says hello world, my hello label, but instead of using the hello label directly, I'm using an Hbox. But an Hbox can have multiple objects inside of it, no? Like for example, here's our Hbox, here's my hello label. I can put in horizontally, I can put in my goodbye label as well. So there's my goodbye label, so another object. So let's not do this. And I want to put my goodbye label inside my Hbox. My Hbox is inside of my my grid pane, and so now we should have two things inside of one cell, right? So if I did that, that means in cell 0, 0 I have an Hbox. And let's try and see if that works by running it. And yeah, right? Cell 0, 0 is pretty big, right? It's actually pushed my button around and made it the way I you know, that is here. So that's kind of a way, you know, I've created stuff that's inside of there, right? So that is something we can definitely put in. And these containers, obviously, if you notice, they grow, right? They're not like something that is a fixed size, you know, or something like that. But can I make them that way? So if I say Hbox dot, and if I say set again, set alignment is something we can do in terms of position, and it kind of talks about that inside of your PowerPoint. So if you go back to your PowerPoint, up in here, we talked about aligning things in your control. If you set alignment, there is an enumeration you can use: position center, position top left, top right, whatever. It's an enumeration that you can use to position what you like. Let's position everything center. So if I said Hbox dot set alignment, right, and then I want to say my position, notice that it pulls up a bunch of objects. Let's say I'm going to put it into center, all right. Again, this is using the position, and I have to use Alt Enter to add the position import up here in the geometry area. Okay. By the way, notice that if there's something that is not being used, it's grayed out. That's normal. But totally, look at all these imports, right? Crazy. but it makes sense because what we want to do is we don't want to import everything from text. We don't want to import everything from layout, just the stuff that we need, right? Okay, so that is something that we got in there. And if we look at that, and if I press run, then again, you don't notice much, but it's actually centered inside of the cell. Okay, so whatever that cell is, centered. Okay. And what about if I wanted to, use the same controls again? Could I do that? Like, let's say we said that inside of pane 00 we have that. What if in pane 01, so remember column, row, and the next row I put the exact same thing. I copy it. Can I do that? And would it complain? And the answer is it does, right? In fact, if you look through here, it says, unless I made a mistake somewhere else, it says exception application start method, reflect invocation target, and so on, caused by Java, application start method. And then you're trying to figure out, it says duplicate children. Here it is, duplicate children added, parent is equal to grid, hgap10, vgap10, alignment top left, so I'm adding duplicate children. And I can't do that, right? If I did the same controls, hello label and goodbye label, and I make another Hbox, so let's say Hbox, and then Hbox2, right? And new Hbox, let's copy this whole thing from here on in, right? And let's just make this Hbox2, just to make it what it is. And I made the same controls. How about then? Will it complain again? So Hbox and Hbox2. Let's see how that works. If we're going to get an error, they're the same controls again, but now, well, I mean, it didn't show it, right? It actually, I just wanted to make sure that you see this. So you see, so 0, 1. So again, it's column 0, row 1, column 0, row 0, right? And I added Hbox2, right? And I added the same objects inside of Hbox2, Hbox and Hbox2. And then what I want to do is I added Hbox2 into this one. And it took it, but because hello label and goodbye label are the same, they're the same objects, all I've done, because these are references that's happening here, I've moved them into Hbox2. So in fact, when I do this, I'm not duplicating them, I'm moving them from Hbox1 to Hbox2. Not really what you might have expected, but that is how it works, right? So again, if I had a couple of additional controls, let's just add some other controls. Let's make this so that I make another label. So we'll call this another label. Another label. And let's make another one. Label, yet another label. So we see what that is. And they're bigger. So that this is good because it'll change the alignment. Okay, so we have goodbye world, hello world, another label, yet another label, and we want to put all this kind of inside of, kind of in the Xbox, the Hbox. Let's see how this works. I like the Xbox. All right, so we put that in. So another label, and we'll say yet another label. Now this is two new ones, right? And you can see that the position center is the same, but they're aligning. And now when we run this code, then we should expect that we're going to see something totally different, and we do, right? So there's hello world, goodbye world, another label, yet another label. Notice that these are centered because that is what I've chosen to put in, and they're inside. The Hbox is inside of the cell. So the cell itself has actually grown. It's like this big. You can't see the cells, but it's there. Okay. And that's something of what we wanted to try. I would love for us to have a way of in here drawing borders and so on, so you can actually see the borders of the grid pane. And if I could, the control would be right here. So if I wanted to draw something or render a control, usually Java puts it right in there, right? There is no, I can set the background and I can set a border, right? So now the thing is, for a border, right, for set border, I would use a new border, right? And in my new border, if I could actually type border properly, in my new border, right, I can't just do, well, I could do this, right? But I need to resolve it. So let's take a look at, first of all, let's go Alt-Enter to select JavaFX border layout. And it requires more than just an empty constructor function, right? It says that it is nullable. It asked me for a border stroke and all this kind of stuff. Let's take a look at that and see if we can look at that online. I think that might be giving us some additional functionality so we can visualize what it looks like. So again, we'll say JavaFX grid pane border. And there's also other things too, but we'll look at this one too. So adding borders. He's making a tic-tac-toe game of some kind or something, and he's given an example of how this works. And what we want is he is actually using the extra document we talked about, which is not exactly what we want to do. Here, what they recommend, and if you look at this, is I want to make a border. And here, you notice that he's making a pane, and there is a bit of a setup and so on. But that's not what we want, right? And notice what he's doing is he's making a scene, and he's calculating here, whoever's doing this, how big the object is going to be, columns and rows. So that's how they're setting up the window so it's the same size, right? So it's cool, but that doesn't really tell us what to do. And you can see in the CSS, when we say CSS, it's kind of the same thing as in how to do this naturally, right? Where it says the grid cell, first column, and so on, and you can say the insets. But we don't want to do that. We want to do it the hard way first, and you're going to learn all about that another time somewhere else. So how do I do the border, JavaFX border class? Let's just go there. Border example. All right, so we can look at that. So how do I make a simple border with a flow pane? That's another kind of thing altogether. And here's something that you can do. So pane.setStyle, and well, that's what I want. I want to do this, set style. So pane.setBorder to a new border where I can set up a border stroke of with a new border stroke inside of color black. Let's copy this for a second. Well, forget what flow pane is for a second. That's kind of a new thing. Well, let's go there and let's put that, copy paste, so we can see what that looks like. So here's pane. So it's obviously not called pane. It's called GridPadding for us. A new border stroke. We don't know what that is, so we're going to press Alt-Enter for that. We don't know what color is. Alt-Enter for that. We're going to also say that the color class, these are, we want to import the class, but we got to be careful on where that is, color. And we want to do JavaFX scene paint, this one. Okay, we don't need this one anymore. So it says corner radii empty, border widths default, border strokes solid. So these are all the different styles that we obviously have. Let's make this all one line so you can see it. Because this way, if we did it right, we can visualize what it looks like. And doesn't matter which application you're looking at, if we did everything right, which we didn't, then you would see everything in here. Actually, what it did was, it did create it. Let me show you what this looks like. But, so there is something there, but it's hard to see. So notice that here, there's no line around here at all. Take a look at that. There's no line, right? And so what this did, this is nice. If I draw it again, but now take a look. If I do this now, you see a nice line that goes around all this. This is where the border is, right here, right? Okay. And what about, can I add borders other places? So if I said grid pane set border like this, this is one. This sets the border around the entire grid pane. But what about inside the cells, right? So it says you could also apply it with a CSS file, right? And it says this is really more simple with an inline CSS, which is you could say set style fx border dash color black. Let's see if we can do something that looks like this. And what the heck is, how can we use CSS in here? That's weird. Well, you can. You can do something that looks like this. Let's comment this one out. And notice that we have over here on the left, our IntelliJ idea gives us the color that's in here, right? What if I chose another color instead of the black color? What if I chose like a kind of another color? Well, it actually does the color that I choose, which is kind of cool, right? So whatever color I want, if I want to make it a gray color or a black color, I can do that here to whatever I want. So I could specify a color instead of just black. All right, so let's see how this looks. So FX border color, and we're also going to try this by hand in a second, but let's see what happens. So if I run it, then we're good, right? Still works. And Shock says we just have to change it to the Hbox instead of the grid pane. All right, that's cool. So this is that. Let's go to this Hbox instead and see if we can do the same thing. So Hbox dot set style, and then what we want to do is we want to start typing in a string. Now this is where I would love to have support for this. So if I say dash fx, hey, look at that, right? Dash border, and you can see that we have border style, border radius, you know, whatever we want. Let's say border color, and we'll go black as well. So black. So we'll try it with some style, right? And let's see how that looks. And we have our little border around the Hbox. Isn't that nice? So that, I mean, it gives us a little bit more visualization of what that looks like. That is the actual Hbox. Cool. I like that a lot. And now this is not efficient, obviously. It's best to have something that is a style sheet that's outside of this, but we're not going to talk about that right now because that's kind of outside the scope of what we're doing. We're learning basics. All right, so cool. Let's do another style. Hbox. I like that style. Hbox.set style. I like that a lot. And then let's type in fx and then dash. We can do alignment. So we already did alignment center. Let's see if we can do alignment without doing that. Alignment, and then I want to do something else. So alignment what? It says string, no suggestions. Let's try center. Let's see if that works. So alignment center, and it gives me a recommendation. It says copy string literal, but let's undo this one and see. No, that's not what I wanted. Let's undo this alignment and see if this alignment is the same as this alignment. Does it work the same way? Does it look the same? Is it worse? Oh, what happened? So we set style, but we set style twice, and it did the alignment, but it took away the Hbox. Why? Look at the example that's in here, right? If you look at the style that's set up here, we can certainly do that, but it looks like we have to use a kind of all the style at once, right? In other words, once we set style, we set it all together. And in the previous example, we kind of we may have seen that in the previous search example that we did. But so how do we do that? So how do we set up both styles in one, right? Because we did this. Should I use semicolons, right? I know, guys. I know this is like, you know, maybe not intuitive to start, but or maybe it is intuitive for you. But I mean, if I assume that semicolons separate everything, can I do it this way? Can I make it so that I can do one style to rule them all, right? Would that work as well as what I'm looking at? So it's centered and this. Now that gives us a lot more control, and it gives me control over pretty much a lot of stuff, right? If I know I can separate my styles in with semicolons, and if I just type fx or even just space, then you can see I have arrows, my background color, my size, my blend mode, you know, all kinds of stuff, right? That I can do. Fill, fonts, you know, I want font family, font size. Let's do a font size of, you know, let's say 20 pixels. I want to see if this CSS is the same as what we had before. So let's run that now. And let's see how that looks, right? So yeah, that looks much better than before, right? In terms of, well, control anyway. It gives us more control. Remember, you can mix containers. You can put one container inside of another container. We've learned that today. So that is a key thing in, you know, kind of creating the layout that we want. So that is set style, and we can set that up. I don't care for the black border. I just wanted to see what that looks like. But the center is cool. I like the centering. That is very cool. I don't need this anymore because that's old style, right? This is kind of a little bit more flowy. It gives me more stuff to do. So that means same thing with this other Hbox. I can do the same thing. We'll leave it in there to give you the example code that's in here. And let's go back to that FX border color black. What else can it do? Let's get rid of this, right? So we don't care about that anymore. And let's see if we can do other stuff. So FX font size. Well, this is interesting. So font size can be done at the grid pane level. This is similar to what we do in other UI programming languages. For example, in C#. If we do something at the font, at the grid pane level, then what happens is everything that's inside there takes that font size minimum. And to demonstrate this, if I set font size 40, right? That's everything inside there becomes font size 40. Let's see if that makes sense. What happens to my font size 20? Does it get overwritten? Right? Or not? So here's something that happened. Notice that my labels got truncated because I don't have a lot of space, right? And this one stayed at 20. I kept it at 20. These ones went to 40. So, okay. So specificity when it comes to setting up your CSS equivalent for this, right, is this. It starts off at the grid pane because the grid pane is created first. That's where the first level of style goes in. And then this is a more specific level in the Hbox because that's one node down. So it's node specific. So if I set 20 in there, this is the style that'll take hold as an example, not the other style, which is this one up here. Okay, so this is the general style, but if I specify a style that's in here, that'll take hold. So that we don't need to do that here. Let's say, for example, I want everything to be 20 inside of my my grid pane, then I'm going to specify it here, and it'll be more consistent. So if I go do that, then again, you can see now that everything is 20 inside here. All the labels are 20. How about my button? My button, which I specified earlier, and we're going to get this button stuff started soon as I got to get that going too for you. But in my button, here's my button layout. We did click me button, and I also specified the font as Consolus, font weight bold 20. Let's see if we can duplicate that a little bit with CSS. So I don't want to do that here. Let's do that at the pane level, right? So again, I want to set my font size, my font family. Let's try that. Just like I did the stuff we did before. So let's try that in. So again, font. What else do I have to do? So fx-font family. And notice it pulls up a nice little list. Right? Here's my Consolas. Right? FX, font size, font family. And then I want also the font weight. Right? Here's my font weight. And it gives me a little, if it doesn't bold, obviously something we know what it is. So everything is going to be bold inside the pane now if everything goes well. Right? So let's see how that works. And yeah, so everything is Consolus, including the button, right? Unless I specify otherwise. If I want to make the button Arial, again, what I would do I would do it in the button. So in the button class itself, I can specify that. I go click me button dot set style to the button. So FX, and let's say, for example, I want the font family to be Arial. Font family to be Arial, right? There it is. And if I did that, so for the button itself, then the font family becomes Arial, right? There's Arial, but everything else is Consolas. All right, so that is a little bit about style and stuff. There's a lot to learn here, and there's no way I can do it within 40 minutes to basically provide all the things that you're going to need for designing UI. And also, this is pretty inefficient. It'd be way better if we can connect a style sheet to the file that we can specify when it looks like buttons or other things. And this is kind of the way that we'd want. FXML is also another way of doing it. So that's kind of a things we can do for set style. One more thing for the grid paint. So we've got this, and it's pretty long, and so we can go border color. We talked about border color over here, right? What else can we do? So arc height, and these are all the things that will work. Block increment, border image insets, border radius and border style, border width, cell size. I like that one. Cell size, let's make that, now here's something. If I made it something like 60 pixels, what does that do when I go cell size? And I'm going to kind of come back to this in a second, right? By the way, could I do something that looks like this? Absolutely. And what it does for me is you can add these two things together, right? So, and nicely, what's happened is that our beautiful IDE, IntelliJ IDEA, has added this just by me doing that. Just by going to the next line, it's broken it up for me, which is nice. All right, so let's see how that looks. So if I want to say a cell size, a fixed cell size of 60 pixels, well, didn't really do much, right? So we'd have to look up what that does for me to get it in. So, again, it says cell size for vertical list view or tree view or table view, and this is the height for a horizontal list view that is the width. Okay, so that's really not applicable to us, right? It doesn't really do what I want it to do, right? So that cell size, we can program it, but remember, just like any CSS on the web, it may not mean anything, right? So that's something to learn. And we can swim through some of these things. So cell size collapsible, which is kind of, it may be something we can change. We can change the cursor when we hover over the box. Fit to width, fill height and fill, we can change that. Font scale, font style. The graphic, there's your H gap and V gap that we can specify here. I can also do a background image if I want to. Max height and min height. Tick counts if you want to do that as well, and many, many other things. Okay, so lots and lots of stuff we can do. Stroke width, which is kind of what I wanted to do, right, in here as well. But you can see that there's like a ton of stuff. All right, so that's pretty cool, and so we've learned a little bit about styling. Again, not really in what I intended today, but that's fine. You should have been able to, you're going to learn a bit more about that in the next class, hopefully. All right, so that's set style. Let's go into, so we've learned how to move things around and everything else. We can also do images, and I wanted to talk about that briefly. So displaying images are really what we're going to do. You can display any image you want. For example, and you can do that in any image type, PNG, JPEG, BMP, whatever you want, you can do that. And you can specify where it is. So if it's in a file in your machine, you would specify it like wherever the file is in the C drive, hot air balloon, if that was the hot air balloon. If you had an image like that, we could put it in there. We're going to pull down an image, and this supposedly is where the image is going to be. Let's pull an image down and put it somewhere in our grid pane. Okay, so when I say pull an image down, let's grab something that we want. So I'm going to go in. I've been thinking about Xbox all day, and it's before Christmas. What the heck? Xbox Series X for Christmas, Santa. Can you get me one? Probably not. Let's look at images for that. I'm going to grab one that is decent. I don't want the ES, I want the X. And you know what? This one has a bit of a blue back or a green background, kind of. So I'm going to grab this one and save image as. Let's make this so that it's understandable. So we're going to call this Xbox Series X.jpg. And remember what we said, it has to be by default inside of our files. So inside of my desktop, in my OOP3200, in my lesson 14 in here, I want to go into my source files. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, my source files, and I want to just drag in this object and see what happens. There it is. And what happens? Do I see it? We haven't really done that before. Oh, externally added files can be added to Git. We want to always add. Absolutely. Let's go to project. There it is. There's my Xbox Series X. Can I visualize it here? Hey, look at that. Right inside my ID, and Visual Studio does the same thing. So this is where it's in the same folder, right? As an example, if I have to put it inside my sample folder, because my sample folder is where my my stuff is. If I wanted it out here, I'd have to swim there, because right now my source, main, and everything else is inside here. So let's put that inside my sample folder, right? So now it's in the same file space as main, and that's important. All right, so if I go back to main Java, let me just clean up some of this. It's my node class, my scene class, my control class, my label class, and we have that little thing. I want to make a new image, and I want to put it inside my grid. So first, I got to make my objects. So I'm going to make them way up here. So controls. This is a control. I specified that would be first. Let's do that. So I'm going to say that image, and that's the first part. Let's put in. I want a JavaFX scene image. That's what I want. Everything JavaFX, and we'll call this Xbox Series X, just because that's what I want. And then I want to make that a new image, and I'm going to pass in the the place it's going to be. Now notice what we need to do is in the PowerPoint, it has a bit of a structure. File is the protocol. All right, so I'm going to grab this just to make it so it's a little easier. And we don't obviously have, thank you IntelliJ, we obviously don't have images hot air balloon. What we have is actually Xbox Series X, right? So .jpg, Xbox Series X.jpg. All right, so that is where it's at. So file, and then in my C colon Xbox Series X. What if I just said file Xbox Series X? And I know I have an example of that here, or you can just do something like this. If it's in the same file area, you can just put that in there completely, and it should work. So that if you run it, it shouldn't complain. If I do one of these and just run it, so testing is important. There's two steps really to do everything. One step is to load the object in memory, and that's what this does. And the second step is to take this memory object, Xbox Series X, and make an image view. So we have something that we need a container to contain the object. So again, I'm going to say image view, and we'll call this the Xbox image view. So I'll go back to that in a second. Xbox image view, right? And again, is equal to a new image view. I'm going to pass in the Xbox Series X in there as an object. So again, I'm going to press Alt Enter. I want the image view from JavaFX, and then that creates my image view. Again, it doesn't do anything because all we've made is the structure for it. So when I run it now, still nothing, right? Because we haven't added it in anywhere. But first we make it. First we load it. So step one when for images is load the image, right? That's the first part, and that's what this is. load image. Next part is step 2 for images is set up a image view to contain it or draw it inside of, call it whatever you like. Here I've got the object. Think about this as a blob or data. I've got data. Here I want to render the data somehow, and my image view allows me to do that. Okay, so that's what it does. And then just like always, I can pop that into an Hbox, and let's replace my another label, and well, actually, or we can put it in directly inside the cell this time. So we have added an Hbox and an Hbox 2. Let's put in our image directly underneath that. So I'll say something like gridpane.add, and we'll put in the Xbox image view. That's what we want to put in there, and then with in the location we want, which is going to be again in, let's say, column 0 but row 2. Okay, and let's see how this looks when we run it now. Does it work, or am I crazy? And yeah, nothing. What happened? Didn't give me an error either. Did you guys get the same thing? So what happened here? Why didn't it go off? Why didn't it turn on? What was the problem? No error. I loaded it up, right? But, and if you followed the PowerPoint, that's kind of exactly what I did. Here's my image view. I passed in the image, and then from there it's drawn. And notice that Hbox, Hbox is the root view, but who cares? We put it in a grid pane, so what does it matter, right? And here's an example of grabbing an image from an internet source. Okay, whatever the internet source would be, but it's the same protocol, right? So HTTP instead of file is the same thing. So what happened here? Did I mess up in terms of loading? I mean, it didn't give me an error, right? So what do you think was the problem? Anybody? So again, loaded up the image. Here's my file, right? And I didn't put in these hash marks. I didn't do this. That's the only thing that's different than, let's say, a protocol that we normally would see, right? It's got to be found inside here. It didn't mess up in any way. And even if I do something that looks like this, and if I run it, you know, it still doesn't do anything, right? And what about if I put it in a wrong location? Let's say Xbox Series 1, right? Did this, run it. And I'm putting it out there because it won't complain if you put the wrong location in. So obviously Xbox Series X, the JPEG, the location that I have in for the file, that's wrong. Why is that? And what if I wanted to put a more specific location, like C:\/ blah 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 blah, where I am right now, users. That's kind of a thing. I want to put relative path, right? Do I need to go right in there? And why doesn't this complain at all? That's the question for you, right? It didn't even throw an error, right? So that's the one thing that didn't do. So we're going to look it up because obviously that's not good. So it says, so let's see if that makes a difference if we were Xbox Series X.jpg and it's sitting there physically inside the same area as my main. And again, from the PowerPoint, it says the same thing, right? Here it is, file, right? And there's the name of the file and whatever. But the only difference is that in the PowerPoint, it puts it in an Hbox, and here I'm putting it directly into a grid pane. All right, well, let's see if instead of this Hbox 2 containing these labels, let's put in just that that object, which is going to be the Xbox Series X Xbox image view. We need to put the image view because we can't use the image itself. It has to be rendered in a view. Everything is a view, right? So that's something. And we don't care about the centering for now. All right, so get rid of that. And let's see what happens when I do it again. So nada. And didn't give me any kind of image at all. It didn't draw it. So what happened? Let's take a look. Let's do some troubleshooting here. And then we'll move on to buttons. So again, image view example in JavaFX. Right, by the way, notice image view is the same as everything else. Here we have an example of exactly what we did. Now, here's something. It says file input stream. This is new, right? We don't have this. Input is equal to file input. We're going to go into resources, images, and some kind of image, right? And then we load it up. Okay. So that is different than what we had before. And we want to add the image view to our scene graph, just like we did before. And here you have an image view. You've loaded it up with the file stream. But notice where it says resources, images. We don't have this structure. So, this is the first thing. And notice that our new image goes from the file stream into input. It's like an extra step. Okay. But the rest is the same. It's just an Hbox. You put it in the image view in the Hbox, and we're good to go. So this is the only step we're missing. Let's see if this is something that we need. Okay. Or if it's just an error. So going back to this, we're just going to go to the image view and see if that works. We're going to go load it up. So first we make the image, but first before that, step 0 maybe is getting this file stream going. So file input stream, as an example, we want to import the class. And once we import the class file input stream, let's move this aside actually and do one of these. This is the location of it. Right? So we just want it to load right from here. So instead of going file with the protocol, let's move it with what it's going to be called, which is the Xbox Series X.jpg, this one. So we don't have a location. We want to look in the same file. And we want to put the file stream input in here. So let's call this, instead of input, that kind of seems odd. We'll call it an image. We'll call this image path instead, right? And we'll take this image path and put that in here. And let's see if that helps us. So run it. If I did everything right, then cool. Or we have an exception now. It says exception application start. Let's see if we can find the exception, what it is. It says internal call reflect exception application start method. System cannot find the file specified. So that I wanted that. Looking for this, can't find it. Doesn't know where this is. Okay, even though Xbox Series X.jpg is right here. And if you look in our project, right, that is where it is. Can anyone tell me, anyone think of a reason why this is the reason why it is this way? Can we debug and see where the path is going? Well, there's something to note here, right? When we're building something, these are raw files, right? So what's happening is when we develop something in production, notice that it produces something that's in here, right? Is our main class, sample fxml. But what ends up happening is it builds this structure all together, right? So if we don't specify a path, right, for this thing, and notice it says like resources and so on. I don't have a resources folder. Up online, this guy may, right? He might have a resources folder, but the reason why I wanted to go here is because we weren't even giving an error. There wasn't even an error being thrown for where this file was. He's looking inside resources images, right? We don't have such a structure in our files. And you can see that it worked for us, right? As an example. So that is a challenge for us. How do I load images in here, and what's the file structure? Well, remember what we're looking at is not this file structure, but the file structure in our in here. So resources images. So where do I put the resources object? And let's try this out. Let's look at another little bit of an example, because you're going to get to this as well. So if I say something like loading images JavaFX IntelliJ, because IntelliJ has a certain way of setting up the the structure, and so this guy, he's giving a structure of, oh look, he's got main, and he's putting his image down in here in the resources folder. Okay, so that he's got a resources folder, we don't. Okay, so that's the first thing. and let's see what he's showing the problem, and let's see what our problem is. Our problem is we don't even have a resources folder here, right? We have our lib folders and external libraries, but we don't have a resources folder. So can I do that? Can I add a new resources folder in here? I got a resource bundle, right? That's something that can be done, right? But I don't want that. I want a new folder for doing stuff. So a new directory, right? As an example. So that we can do. But where are we going to put it? Are we going to put it at this level? Where did he put it? Because take a look. In his case, he has his target down there, and you can see the source up here. And then as we swim down, this seems to be at the same level as the Java object itself. So it's like kind of way out here, right? So inside the source area. All right, so again, what would that be? Did that work for you? Source, sample, Xbox Series X. Did it work for you? Let's try it out if that's the case. So if we did source, remember source is where we're building it from. Is that where it's going to be at the end? Source, sample, Xbox Series X. Let's see if that's true, if this is the way it's going to work. And notice that the file input stream, we don't have to put extra hashtags in here or whatever. Let's see if that works for us and if it gives us what we want, and indeed it does. Yay! Wonderful. Thank you for that. We're almost at the end, and I want to talk a little bit about event handling. First of all, though, this image path and the image view is massive, and we want to change the style. So we're going to say that Xbox Series X dot Xbox image view is what we want, dot set style, and I want to put the same thing in there, FX dash, and I want kind of an image. I want the size is what I want. So I want the size. This is font size, FX cell size, right? How do I do the image size? Because I want to basically, I mean, by default, it says image width is definitely something that would help me. So let's say my image width is going to be like 200 pixels. So that'll kind of make it so that, will this make it proportional? Or is it going to just make the width 200 pixels? What does that look like? So again, if I was to run this thing really quickly, it doesn't affect this. So image width, if you hover over that, is, and it'll probably tell you what this is in terms of, if you hover over it, one thing it tells you is, it might tell you that this doesn't apply to this at all. But going back to the PowerPoint, it says that if you want to make it proportional, there's a couple things you can do. Set fit width and set fit height. And so that maybe is something else we might have. So something FX border, wrong one. And of course the border is what I wanted, but not the image. It's not the border. So if I said that's the border, but what about the width? If I put in width and I start talking about width, arc width, border width, fill width, tab width, a bunch of other stuff. But so we can't do it like that. So fit width. So set fit width, right? As an example, we want to put in a number like 200 pixels. And if I was to do that and run it, then it does a very weird Xbox because it doesn't do proportional stuff. And there's another command that's in here which is set preserve ratio to true. So X for I'm rushing, but set Xbox image view dot set preserve ratio to true, which means when I set this to 200, the height also goes to its proportional size. So that does that, and now we have a little image. And let's make it bigger. So let's say make it like 400, so we can see that it is indeed proportional, and you can see that that now comes in as proportional. Yay! Pretty slick. And the other thing that it talks about, just to finish up with images, is if you want to set the image, if you have more than one image, you can swap between one image and the other, right? So let's say, for example, I had a PS5 that I wanted instead of an Xbox. let's get that image really quickly from the internet. So I'll say PS5. I want to get that image. We'll do the same process. I go to images. You can't find one of these, by the way, at the time of this recording. Anyway, there's no way you can buy or even find a PS5 or an Xbox Series X. So I want this, and I want to say save image as. Luckily, it's gone into the same sample image. Let's call this PS5, right? And now that we have it locally, you can see that inside of our source we have a PS5 image. There it is, nicely. And we want to take our main and we want to do the same kind of idea with it. So let's do the same thing. So we want to set up an image which is a PS5. PS5 is what the thing is going to be called, right? And that's going to be a new image. We're going to look at the image path. So we'll say PS5 path is what we're going to call it. We don't have PS5 path now, but we're going to get that stream in there. So that's something we need as well. So we're going to say that the file input stream, we'll call this the PS5 path, right? Is going to be source sample PS5.jpg, PS5, and that is our PS5 path. Why is that complaining? Yep. And then once we have this, then what we're going to do is the same thing. We're going to make a new image view, which we're going to call the PS5 image view is equal to a new image view. And we're going to pass in the PS5 image inside there. There's my PS5 image view. And what I want to do is I want to swap this out. I want to swap out one image for the other. Now, actually, do we need the image view? I don't think we do. If I want to swap, I want to set an image from our original image view. Well, what I want to do is when I click the button, I'm going to say clicked. Hello label is set clicked. We'll say at the beginning, instead of outputting, this is just our debug output, right? In our handle method for the button, we'll change the hello label to say PS5, PS5, right? And let's rename the hello label so that it makes sense. So hello label is going to be the image label. So we'll refactor it to something else, right? So refactor, rename. We'll call the hello label image label. And we'll make it, instead of hello, we'll start it with an Xbox Series X, right? We don't want to do the goodbye label anymore because or these labels, because we're just going to make this all about the Xbox and the PS5. So it's going to introduce some errors because we have a new edge. This thing is going to be gone, right? Because the image label is going to be there, but the goodbye label is not going to be there anymore. We don't need, well, we need this Hbox 2 because of the Xbox image view. That's fine. We'll make another one in a second. So these are all good so far. What we want to do is we want to make one more. Well, actually, we can leave the same Hbox 2. We're just going to swap out the image view that we're going to have. So instead of calling this the Xbox image view, because that is not just the Xbox, we'll call it the console image view. So right-click, refactor, rename to the console image view. That makes more sense, right? Than whatever it is. Set fit width to 400. Set preserve ratio to true. And what I want to do is when I click onto the object, I want to change the image text to PS5, and I also want to change the console image view set image to my PS5 image. That's what I want to do, if that makes more sense. Okay, so that is what I want to do. Let's see if that works. So run it if everything did well, and if I go here it says Xbox Series X, and if I click me, then it becomes a PS5. So if I click it again, nothing happens because it's already a PS5. All right, so that's the way that we've set up our buttons. One more thing before we go is inside the bottom part, it talks about handling events. So far what we've done is we have an event handler that's inside of our program, right? And the event handler for our button is inline. This is kind of a set action, and what we want to do is we created this new event handler action that's in here. But what if I wanted to use a named event handler as well, or if I wanted to share this event handler with another button? Then what I can do is I can go in here and make the event handler first. So just like it says here, we can call it a whatever we want, so that our button click handler. I'm just going to grab this text here and modify right from the PowerPoint. So there is our button click handler. Notice that it implements a event handler action of type with action event type. I want to point this out for you because there's a couple things to note. One, I have an inner class. This is an inner class, an example of an inner class that sits inside of main. Main is the class, and then, hey, look, there's another class right here. Again, there's no structs in Java, but we can use an anonymous or a class like this, an inner class that does something similar to a struct. Okay. So here, notice that both of these have the handle method. The handle method, which is part of the event handler protocol, right? Which is a protocol, again, it would be the interface. This is your interface, right? We must override the handle method that takes in an action event and the event itself, right? So here, and again, we don't have a lot of time to talk about events, but you should know a little bit about event handling by now. I want to pass all this stuff inside of here. All right, so this is what I want to do. I want to say image label and set text. Notice that this is all glowy, glowy to the max, if you will, but this is not. Okay, I want to point this out. Let's not do this, but instead of, I want it, so set action, set on action, by the way, is what it is. Instead of setting action on action to this, let's comment this out for a second, right? So I want to comment this piece out. Okay, and let's rewrite this a little bit. Okay, so this, I'm doing this. I'm going to rewrite this event all together. So I'm going to say click me button dot set. Now look at what it says. There's a bunch of other things. On key pressed, on key typed, a bunch of different things. On mouse clicked, but we want to do the the on action, right? On action event. We want to, which action is it going to be? I want to specify the button click handler instead. Can I do that? Or what is it? What else do I need to specify in order for me to do this? Because this is almost complete. Button click handler is the name of the class, right? So what if, do I have to do this, a new button click handler? Because really, at the end of the day, that's kind of a weird thing to do. I mean, when you look at it, here's button click handler, but I want to make the set action to this. Well, yeah, because this class has never been instantiated, right? And so what's happening is here that we want to create a new instance of this class, which implements the event handler. Let's see if this works equivalently now. So again, running it, and I've got my object, and I click me, and then yeah, right? So this is an example of a button click handler, an event handler that sits outside of my button. And down here, I'm gonna leave this in play, but this is an example of an anonymous event handler where I don't have a class, but I'm actually instantiating an object that's inline. This is kind of like a delegate in some languages or an anonymous function in other languages, right? Again, but this is one way of doing it, and this is the other way. Okay. That's really all I wanted to cover. It talks a little bit more in detail about what this relationship is here in the PowerPoint slides. I've included this here for you so that way you can reference these. One thing that we didn't have a chance to cover today was the text field, but you'll notice that it's very similar to other text fields that we've seen before. We can make a new text field, and from there what we can get is we can create some sample data in the text field as well. And then what we can do in the text field is when we want to get access to that data, it returns. We use get text. We use the getter to get the text that someone entered and input it here. All right, so this is the only thing we didn't have a chance to cover. I'd invite you to take a look at the documentation, as I'll have to tell you that there's probably going to be inputs and buttons and labels and images on your Lab 5. All right, pretty simple stuff. Okay, and if there's anything else I ask you to do, I will give you an example or set it up for you. All right, so there's nothing that you're going to have to guess at in your Lab 5. So it'll be pretty straightforward. Okay, let's put this up on GitHub. I think we've done some good examples here for some of this this insanity that we put together. But so far we have this little app, and all it does is a little UI, and we can just swap between a Series X and a PS5. Only if it was this simple in real life, then that'd be awesome. Okay, let's put this up on GitHub. So I'm going to go to, just like before, commit. I'm going to kind of click all these. Right, these are unversioned files, and I want to say added Xbox and PS5 to project. All right, that's what I did. Commit all, and then I'm going to go to push this up to GitHub like so. And you should have everything that I had. Any questions before we go? So I think we've kind of covered most of it. A good example. And this is, by the way, guys, how does this fit with Java and what we've been talking about with classes and objects and inheritance? It totally fits, because now what we're doing is we're using a class that's built in that has a lot more detail, and that is forcing us to use a structure, which is a framework. And JavaFX is the framework for us that we have to adhere to in order for us to produce a user interface. So really cool. And it's a little bit more visual, and we see what we get out of it. All right, so just to remind you then that before we go, in class exercise 13, that's due by Friday, but if you're here with me in class, then hand it in what you have today, just as an example of what we've done. Java Quiz 2, please don't forget to do this. This is worth 5% of your final grade, and is due Sunday. You can knock this out before Sunday. Obviously, you don't want to wait till then. Java Lab 5, again, is a partner lab that's due on Sunday, and you'll have all your marks on Monday. That's the due date. Okay, any questions at all about the stuff that I've shown you here today? All right, guys, if there's no other questions, it's the best 10 out of 13. I believe so. I think that's what we said. Yeah. I'm pretty sure. So if you didn't do your, 3 of your ices, then yeah, you'd have the best 10. Anyone else have any other questions around anything that we've talked about this semester? All right, so things to look for then. Things that are left. 1, I'm going to make a little video, just like I did last week, around your Java Lab 5, right? Which is something that it's going to be due on Sunday. I'm going to produce the video and give you the documentation on it. I'm almost done doing it. I wanted to just see how this day went today, to see how you guys are okay with it, if everything went well, any questions or problems. Looks like you guys are good. It looks like, and is anyone not good with the stuff we've talked about, or did it really fail for some people? If you're completely not good, put an X. If you're good, that's great, because this is what it's going to be based on. All right, so yeah, so that's going to come out. I'm going to make a little video for you guys, and it'll be due Sunday. Otherwise, guys, thank you so much for this semester. Lots of fun with C++ and Java. Again, lots of learnings too for everyone. And good luck with your studies next semester if we don't speak. I will be available for any kind of help on Friday if you need help with your Java Lab 5 as normal. But otherwise, good luck to you. I hope you wish you the best for people that are here live or online. I want you to have a wonderful holiday. I'm looking forward to a better year in 2021 where we have a chance to get out of this COVID mess that we've been in. We'll have a chance maybe to see each other in 2021 as well, as things start to resolve and become closer to normal. Maybe not exactly normal, but kind of a new normal of where we're going to sit. And I'm really looking forward to that with you guys. So otherwise, guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys coming out and participating and asking questions and all those kind of things. And we'll see you next semester potentially.